So my name is Jivesh Toor. I'm originally from Singapore, grew up in the UK. Been living in Chicago since 2011. I started a business here, uh, kind of a luxury custom clothing business. Um, so ran that all the way until the end of 2020, shut that down because of COVID and the riots and the looting and all of that. And so along with that, because my visa to the US was tied with my business. So when I shut that down, that also the visa also expired with that. So I relocated back to Singapore for that time, and then in the beginning of 2022, was considering maybe moving back here to the States. Started speaking to an immigration attorney. They suggested that I could. The investment amount was very different than the initial time that I'd come in. I think the government might be looking to stimulate more new small business growth, and so that seemed like it was an interesting opportunity. But my caveat was, I told the attorney, I was like, look, but I don't want to bootstrap a business again, because the first time I did it, there was a lot of expensive learning, and that came at the expense of client experience and just brand reputation and whatnot. So the first 3 years, I feel like if I could have avoided that, that would have been a lot easier. So he's like, so why don't you just go ahead and try a franchise instead? That way you get all the benefits of a business model that's already pre-existing, and the immigration attorneys, the immigration officers prefer franchises because it's already a proven business model that's shown to be successful in the American market. And so through that, somebody connected me with Krista, and as a broker. So yeah, she showed me a whole bunch of different services based on the budget that I had outlined for the investment amount, based on my skill set and whatever my previous work experience was. And yeah, it was a tighter budget. So I think we were looking more at service-based type businesses. And out of maybe the 15, 16 businesses that we reviewed together, maybe even 20, this seemed like it was the best fit. So I did some validation of my own and my due diligence. I think there was a couple of other franchises in the running, but I just went ahead and started doing my validation calling to all the other franchisees and getting feedback. So, there were some pros and cons, challenges, opportunities. It was quite helpful. And so that's how I made my decision.
So now I'm going to dive in and just kind of break apart some of those pieces, talk a little bit more about the E2 visa. For those who aren't familiar, maybe just explaining a little bit more about that and what that process was like for in your experience.
Sure. So I've had multiple E2 visas in the past. I think I might have. So the first time I did it was 2011, and then I renewed anywhere between every 2 to 3 years. And most recently applied for this particular one here at the beginning of this year. So the process is generally quite straightforward. I work with an immigration attorney. Just to outline what an E2 visa is, it's a non-immigrant visa. So it is specific for countries that have a free trade agreement with America. So this allows for ease of citizens from that country to come into America to work as a non-immigrant, meaning there's no intention to ever become a green card holder or to become a naturalized citizen. And the purpose of the business here the purpose of your visa here is purely to run and operate the business in some way, shape, or form. And you need to be the majority owner of your business. So that's what the E2 visa is. So that's what I decided to come in on. The process involved a immigration attorney. So they had to fill out all the necessary paperwork for the E2 visa. We had to put a business plan together based on the business that I wanted to do. We had to show the source of the funds to ensure, and they obviously double check that and want to make sure that the source of the funds are legitimate. So it's not, coming from inappropriate places or trying to wash or launder money, or any kind of funny business like that. So if it's from your savings, they want to see your savings history. If it's from investment amounts, they want to see the whatever investment vehicle you have, all the statements. If it was a gift, they want a gift letter. If it was a loan, they need loan letter. And even if it's a gift, they want to see where the source of the funds are for the gift. So let's say if it's a family member, they want to see all the family members' finances and where do they get that from. So after that was done, they submit it to the embassy. So in my case, I submit it to the embassy in Singapore because that's where I'm from. They always recommend that you submit it to the embassy in the country that you are from or closest to, because if you are rejected entry for whatever reason, you're not left stranded somewhere else. So I applied, that got sent through. In the past, it typically takes anywhere from, so what I've been told, it takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months for you to get an appointment at the embassy. So there is a interview that's required as part of the visa process, in-person interview. From what I understand, in Singapore, it's a little bit faster just because I think they're a little bit more efficient, and it's a smaller country, right? So not that many people, utilizing this avenue. So I managed to get mine in just a matter of a couple of months. In the past, what I would do is I would go for the interview. I'd have all my supporting documents with me, basically a little case file. All the documents that the lawyers needed would have been mailed directly to the embassy, arriving no more than 2 weeks before the appointment date that had been set. And you go in and you actually speak to an immigration official who asks you all sorts of questions about what's your intent here, what's the plan, how are you looking to scale. They just want to get to the bottom of like, how are you going to do this? What's the plan? Does it sound legit? And they just want to verify essentially everything. Something a little bit different happened this time around, which kind of was a little bit unusual for me. In the past, when I went for the interview, usually they kept my passport, and with no issues, within a week or two, usually they would mail it back to me with the issued visa in it. This time around, I was actually given back my passport right away, and I was given just a generic form with all these questions on it. And they said, look, we just want some additional information. Can you go ahead and fill this out? Email this back to us. It could take another month, 2 months, 3 months processing time. We're not really sure, but so that was a bit of a shock. I thought that, I was anticipating getting that done earlier. So they asked additional questions like travel history, any previous visas, any previous travel into the United States. I think I just wanted to do more of an in-depth background check. And after bringing this up with the immigration attorneys, just because I was like, wait, this is a little bit different than before. Is there something, that I shouldn't be concerned about? And according to them, this was happening more and more often across a lot of their clients from different places. So that was that. And what I planned for, maybe it might take 3 months, but I think within a matter of 4 or 5 weeks, I ended up getting notification that everything went through. So that was fine. They mailed it back to me, and that was it. I guess that, I hope that outlines what you were looking for in terms of the visa side of things.
Did you see as going through the E2 visa process with a franchise versus like kind of bootstrapping your own business? Can you kind of talk to the differences of that?
The big difference is you have reference points for the business plan. You have some structure as to how other franchisees have run their business. Through the validation calls, you can generally get a much better idea of what your assumptions are for your business plan. Whereas if you're bootstrapping, you may not necessarily always have access to benchmarking data, and a lot of your assumptions may not necessarily be well-founded. They're just kind of pulled out of thin air, or whatever your research shows you. fortunately, with 100 different, I think this particular franchise at the time had about 140 something, 140 franchisees. So, I mean, I must have spoken to at least 25 different franchisees to get some idea, um, of what model they use on their business.
You had your immigration attorney. They were the ones who referred you to thoughtful franchise brokers. Once you kind of said that that was the direction you wanted to go, you were also doing your own kind of research.
So the franchisees actually came down to a point where um, I think at a certain point, I had, introductory calls with Gotcha Covered. Um, I'd filled out a potential franchisee questionnaire. They also want to do their due diligence to make sure that you're a good fit for the franchise. Of course, they want to make sure you're not going to fail, because if they do, they have to disclose that in part of their as part of their federal disclosure document, right? It doesn't look good for potential franchisees saying, "Hey, look, you've got franchisees that got shut down." So they want to interview them and make sure that we're going to be a good fit, or ideally be compatible to grow with. And at some point, they did provide me a list of all the different franchisees with their contact information for the purpose of validation. So I think legally they are not supposed to claim certain things for liability sake. So it's better for you to do your own calls with each franchisee to get, information directly from the source rather than through corporate.
As far as considering a franchise, in addition to just the ease of the E2 visa and having sort of this plug and play, like validated kind of stats that you're able to go based on, are there other reasons that you were considering a franchise versus bootstrapping sort of outside of that, from the practicality of starting up your business, of getting off the ground, of things like that were considered as well? And if you can...
I mean, I just think that and once again, I don't know that this applies to all franchises, right? So I know that Gotcha Covered just got purchased by a larger entity that has multiple different franchises under it, and also has multiple different franchise core services under it. Things like, call center, phone answering systems, bookkeeping, all of that. Having run a business before and managing these independent services, even if it's SEO and web marketing and all that, it just takes so much time to teach each vendor what you're about, and for them to actually get what you know, who you are and what the messaging is, and get on brand. And that time is money, right? That time is money, whether it's managing the vendor, or just communicating with the vendor, or going back with new edits and just trying to get things done, or just in general, just the general price point on SEO or whatever it may be. The nice thing is with the franchise, you're leveraging efficiencies, right? So with all this stuff already being in-house, so to speak, or if they have vendors that just have account managers that focus only on this one franchise, they already get it right off the bat. And then all they need to do is understand more of just the subtle nuances that make you unique as a business to be able to fine tune. And I find that it's actually a lot more affordable, paying for these services through going through the franchise than doing it independently.
As you were going through the process, I guess more specifically to thoughtful franchise brokers, can you speak to that experience of going with them once you'd been kind of handed off from your immigration attorney, that process of being able to identify the best opportunity for you, your skill set, your capacity that you have?
Yeah, so I think it's it was to you guys' credit, it was very consultative, right? So the whole point is finding the right fit for you. I mean, I didn't know that franchise brokers were a thing until I came across this. I mean, I never even considered getting into a franchise, to be honest. So this is all a learning experience for me. But it's very similar to buying a home. So you meet with a broker who basically gets all the information from you that is pertinent. What's your budget? what are the things that interest you? What are the things that, um, inspire you? What were the things that you'd like to do? And obviously, with the budget that I had, being a tighter budget, um, it was very clear that it's going to be more of a service-based type franchise rather than a brick and mortar or a physical location. But that was by design. I wanted to make sure that this was going to be, the visa was going to be able to be done on this particular budget, right? Um, and so we looked at a whole bunch of different service-based industries. I mean, I'm trying to recall some of them, from home inspections to locks, locksmithing to cleaning services, to gym equipment repair and whatnot. Um, and, I guess at each stage there was feedback from me in order to kind of tailor it down to whatever it is that I wanted. For example, I know that cleaning services are great, and a lot of people do that because of once you develop that clientele, there's ongoing cash flow. But I did not want to necessarily manage that many people, and I didn't want to manage schedules that change and people who's things happening at home and whatnot. It's just juggling a lot of those things, and I've managed people before my previous business, and that's an area where I didn't necessarily want to do so much. I wanted to focus more on the selling side, business development, getting things known, and then handing off installation and all the technical stuff to people who specialize in that, as a third party service. So this model allowed me to do that. I'm trying to think what else was asked about. I think you guys had asked about what kind of lifestyle would I be looking at, in terms of day-to-day operation of a business. That's a very important thing. Do you want to be out in the field doing everything yourself? Do you want to be, sitting at home, running out of a home office? Do you want to have a physical location where you have clients coming in? Do you want to have a virtual business? There's just so many different potential lifestyles or day-to-day realities as a business operator that you could potentially live. And I think just inquiring as to what that looks like for me, or what it looked like for me, and how we would pair that up with potential franchises in order to make that work.
Yeah. And so then it sounds like Got You Covered really met those check boxes for you. Did your immigration attorney, was that also the person who suggested looking into franchises in general, or was that a thought that you had to look for a franchise?
No, yeah, I wasn't even considering doing a franchise at all. Was not even on my radar. In all honesty, I actually approached the immigration attorney at first. I mean, I've already done an E2 visa before, right? Been here before for 10 years on E2 visas. Then I was in Singapore, and then I got a potential job offer from a Singaporean company to enter a new market in the United States. So I ended up speaking to the immigration attorney, trying to figure out how to navigate that hurdle. Now, that didn't work out. And at the same time, I was also like hedging bets. I was like, well, if that doesn't work out, maybe I could look at other potential options as well. So this is where the conversation came up back into, well, you could look at E2 visas again. Investment amounts have gone down, so that's helpful. And then the conversation came up, well, I wouldn't mind, but I don't want to bootstrap. And then that's where they came up with, why don't you franchise, right? Well, why don't you look at a franchise? So I was like, okay, I'm open to the idea. I'd never thought about it before. I personally always thought it was far more expensive, at least than, I think that's the perception, right? It's all relative, clearly. But in my mind, a franchise just seemed to cost more. And so that's where that whole conversation came in. And the immigration attorney seemed to feel that it would be easier to come in using a franchise model because as opposed to a bootstrap business where there are a lot more question marks for the immigration official to be able to fill out. At least coming with the franchise, they're like, okay, we know that this person is going to have some structure. There's a model that already works. It's already proven and got traction in the American marketplace, and so the likelihood of success is better. Hence, they're more likely to hire more Americans. They're more likely to pay more taxes, state and federal, and add to the economic growth of the country.
So, can you talk to me a little bit about how your business is going so far? Have you started actually taking on clients?
Yeah, so I'm still in the very early stages of my business. Did the corporate training at the end of July, right at the tail end of July, and basically, so I just came in just before that. Did the corporate training at the end of July. Used all of August to basically set up the groundwork. So whether that's getting a vehicle and just kind of getting the base set, setting up all the vendor accounts and familiarizing myself with some of the processes and setting up some of the marketing things. And so that was August. In September, we just went live at the beginning of September with our marketing. So we've done our SEO, and we've done AdWords and Google Ads and Facebook, and direct mailing to people who've moved into new homes, because that's what our product targets. Somebody moved into a new place and they need window treatments, that kind of stuff. I've also been very busy with all the networking and business development activities. So, going to different chambers and networking groups and just trying to build relationships with people. So the franchise territory that I purchased is an area that I'm not really familiar with. So it's almost like I'm coming into an unknown place. So it's taken a little bit of time and effort in order to connect with people in the community, and that will slowly grow. But yeah, I think within the first month, I've probably done 3 or 4 consults already. In fact, I just came back from one, just drove back downtown from a consult in the northern suburbs. Through one of the lead generators or lead sources. I think we're using Home Advisor or something like that. Leads coming from that, and it's a learning curve, So you're balancing multiple things at once. You've got all your training and from all the different vendors, because I think we have something like 16 different vendors. Each one of them totally, different products, price points, how they do things, and so there needs to be time allocated to that. Then you've got time that needs to be allocated to all your business development activities. And there's stuff that needs to be allocated towards working with the client leads that you have. And then you also have to actually run the business as well, right? So I've been busy juggling all 4, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. And hopefully I get to the point where I have sufficient leads coming in where then I can hire additional help to be able to focus and do some aspects of this and start growing. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you talking about that being in an area that you're not necessarily familiar. I had spoken with another client who grew up in her area and really spoke to kind of that as far as her marketing and her kind of strategy. So I appreciate you speaking to that. Yeah.
It certainly does help. It certainly does help when you've got an existing network of friends, family, and people that trust, and can refer already. But it's not impossible. Like I said, when I moved here 10 years ago, I didn't know anyone either. And I started a business out of my apartment and had a store on Michigan Avenue and Oak Street. So that was great. I just need to recreate the magic again.
Yeah, absolutely. How long did you work with Thoughtful Franchise Brokers? What was the timing of when you had started with them, their whole process, and when you had chosen Got You Covered?
I think it was all within a matter of a couple of months. I'm trying to recall, but I think maybe the conversation may have started in December at some point, maybe in November at some point, and I got referred to, and there were just a lot of things that were happening concurrently.
Right, because that's kind of in tandem with doing the E2 visa, picking your franchise or your franchisee coming together.
It's sort of like, okay, so I spoke to the immigration attorney. I was like, okay, I'm talking to the franchise people, right? And so I engaged the immigration attorney knowing that I would eventually pick a franchise. So that at least was moving at the same time. And then, as different franchises got presented to me, kind of whittling it down to what I wanted and going through all the validation calls at the same time, they're still working on my case for what they call the petition for the E2. Of course, a lot of it revolves around the franchise itself. They need the franchise disclosure documents. In fact, the immigration attorneys recommended a franchise-specific lawyer who would review what's it called? The FDD, is that it? Yeah. To review that, just so that there's clear understanding. And so once that was done, then I did all the validation calls, and I did that all within a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. I just, emailed everyone, text message everyone. Can I just have 30 minutes of your time? And that was very, very helpful because I got to get um, actual candid view of what these people's lives were, rather than, the brochure marketing version of things. I mean, they're not terribly different, but at the same time, to hear from people, regular people who have families and kids and other things in their lives that need attention, how they manage all these things at once and make it work specifically for them and their lifestyles. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can talk about the goals for your business long term. I know you talked about maybe adding a couple staff members, but then just like the longevity of that kind of with this visa and what that looks like.
I said, from my understanding, and I'm not a legal expert by any means, but I wanted something that I wanted this to be the doorway into back into America, right? Because I feel like it's a great place to do business. I've went to college here. I spent 10 years running in another business, so I'm familiar with it. I could go elsewhere. I could go back to Singapore. It's a great country, but the learning curve would be far greater than me here. So I wanted to make sure that this would be a business that was simple, always in demand, nothing too complicated. The main entity itself is what's tied to the visa. After that, I can create sub entities that fall under that main entity, and I can get into other areas that are of similar. I can get into real estate. I can get into flooring, complementary products, or whatever. But I can grow into different types of businesses. But this would just be the doorway in, right? Now, other aspects of the visa is that I think they issue them anywhere from 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, maybe even 20 years, depending on each case by case. I think they typically do a shorter issued visa upfront. And then as the business gets larger and more stable, I think they probably are willing to extend the time that they allow the validity of the visa. And the nice thing about the visa is that there is no real limitation on how much or how little time you need to spend in America, right? So let's say the business does scale up and you do not need to necessarily be in America running the business every single day anymore. You can still have that visa and you can come and go as you please. With a green card, you're limited to, I think you have to spend a minimum amount of time here and whatnot. The other benefit of the E2 visa is that because it's a non-immigrant visa, you are not impacted by American tax. So whatever revenue you make here or income you make in America, you pay taxes on those, on that money. If you were, let's say I'm from Singapore. Let's say I have a family business there or something else that I make any income from over there. I do not have to pay American income tax on that. So, there are pros and there are cons, right? So that's for some people that's a pro. I think, it just comes down to what each person's looking for.
What advice would you have for someone looking to obtain a franchise for their E2 visa? Like if you have any tips or any suggestions or encouragement?
Actually, it's so funny. I just had a conversation at a networking event maybe a week ago with this lovely couple who had just got their green cards, and they're from Taiwan, and they'd been here for about 10 years previously on an E2. And they were talking about how, um, they're very close with like this expat community of Taiwanese people, and how a lot of Taiwanese people are trying to come to America on an E2. And they were saying how a lot of them were struggling because the first thing that they did was they gathered all whatever capital they could, and then they came to America uh, by starting a restaurant, even though they had no experience in food service or restaurant management or anything else. And that's interesting for me because I started my career in hospitality, in food and bev, and it's a tricky business, that's quite capital intensive. So the first thing I said to them was like, why wouldn't they do a franchise? If they have no clue what they're doing. First of all, a service-based business would be less capital intensive than a physical location business where you have to pay rent and you have to do a build out and have all this equipment and inventory. um, why wouldn't they try to go for a franchise instead, where they would probably cost less, they'd be less likely to go off the rails, make mistakes. If it's especially when it's a culture, that they're not familiar with. It just seems to me like it was the smarter thing to to do. So that's what I suggested to them, and I actually said, um, if you do go back to any of these meetings or these communities that people are looking for that, I strongly suggest, looking at a franchise broker such as you guys, because you guys really did help me. It's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes you need somebody to kind of educate you and lead you through the process. Yeah.
Yeah. And even having, whether or not you had discovered thoughtful franchise brokers, whether just the fact that your immigration attorney kind of came to you with that offer too, yeah, it is something that, and I appreciate what you said earlier about the, all the different opportunities of franchises that are out there and the different tiers of investment. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying that people have to always go for service, but let's say if they did have the capital with them and they wanted to go for something much bigger, go for it. But at least that you're not going to be figuring it out once you get here, you know. And I think from an immigration standpoint, especially when it's involving people from different countries who may not be familiar with American culture, or haven't spent a huge amount of time here understanding what their target market exactly is, it's a huge leg up. I mean, of course, with a franchise, you do end up, you do pay for that service upfront and on an ongoing basis. But that's, I think, the trade-off for ensuring that that startup phase is not volatile, or you don't have that early crash and burn.
You mentioned SEO and marketing and those types of pieces. I guess I'm curious, in each of those areas, the support that you're getting from your franchise, and also where you feel like you had that skill set. It was something that comes naturally to you, and maybe where you have struggled in that and the franchise has supported you, if you could speak to that at all.
Sure. So for me, my previous experience running a small business, I mean, I had to wear many hats, right? And it was a business where I basically had to figure everything out. So I designed clothing. We had to come up with an entire brand identity, packaging, graphic design, fashion shows, seasonal collections, custom garments for people, engagement events. So it was just constantly things going on. And I just, even though I wore many hats, you never really become incredibly good at one thing because you never focus. Which is helpful, right? Which is helpful in some regard, because then it gives me an idea of, okay, certain things. But the one thing that I think that the franchise really, or at least got you covered, so that's the only one I can speak to because that's the only one I know of, really was very helpful, is from the marketing, right? So I think that most businesses, most businesses have similar products. Most businesses have similar price points, generally speaking. I mean, there are going to be some distinctions and differentiating factors, whatever value you bring to the marketplace. But the single most important thing for the success of a business, at least within the first couple of years, is can you generate those leads? Can you generate that revenue? Can you close those leads? And Gotcha Covered, I think previously, the people who run it all had very strong marketing backgrounds. And for me, running an operational business, that's fine. I had vendors that did my marketing, but managing them was so difficult and took so much time, and they weren't always great at it. So this having that side of things already taken care of by corporate was very helpful. Already had a really robust system of like, okay, these are your key winning strategies, through all the different franchises that we've had. This is where they had the best traction. Now you can still go off and figure it out for yourself. Try it out for 6 months, see if it works based on whatever, your specific market is or whatever. But they pay a lot of attention to the ROI on what you spend on marketing, right? And down to, I also think that historically the company was a software company. So they made a very important point of putting in all the data for every lead, every conversion, so that they can use that data in order to make better decisions, to help market more effectively, to help sell more effectively, to help build margins more effectively. And it's not just a advertising vendor that I would have had to look at. I would have to look at somebody who would come in and basically help me with my entire marketing strategy, So that was really great. Other areas, I mean, of course, I knew nothing about window treatments prior. So obviously, having great training programs and great vendors with great training programs of their own, complementary, that's also been a huge value add for me. And I think the thing that I feel like I've done strongest, and that I brought with me, is just the consultative selling and the sales side of things and the business development. So that's what I know. That's what I know I'm good at. So at least I can really push that part and learn the rest while I'm doing it. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And then I guess before we hop off the call, is there anything that I've failed to touch on or that you want to add about your work with thoughtful franchise brokers?
Krista followed up pretty regularly. She wanted to know where I was at certain points, anything else that she could do, even after the fact, just checking in, how here are some options and good luck. Just like any other business, you want to make sure that your client experience is good, and the experience starts from first contact all the way to follow up after the conversion's done and after the transaction's done, just to check back in and make sure everything's okay. And case in point, obviously the video interview is another touch point. So yeah, I think you guys did a great job.